this base price would expect approximately 20,000 crores for all the spectrum between 1800 and 900 megahertz.
The telecom industry today faces multiple challenges to drive revenue growth while sustaining profitability. Yet its future prospects continue to be bright.
The period of difficulties is now coming to an end. During the last 1 year, our government has taken a number of forward-looking initiatives in the telecom sector.
The lackluster response to the spectrum auction has forced the government to actually cut down the reserve price by 30%. But is that good enough to bring cheer back to the telecom sector? And is the worst really over for this space? That's the big debate on We Mean Business tonight. I'm Shweta Rajpal-Kohli. Let me introduce our guests on the show. With us here in the Delhi studio, Mr. Rajan Matthews, Director General of COAI, Mr. Ashok Sood, Secretary General of OSPI, Mr. Jaideep Ghosh, Partner KPMG. Also joining us, Mr. Nripendra Mishra, former Chairman of TRAI on a link. Mritunjay Kapur, Country MD of Protiviti Consulting, joins us from Mumbai. And Mohammad Chaudhary, Leader Telecom PwC India, also joins us from Mumbai. Our telecom expert Arijit Banerjee is also with us on the show. So let me first actually go across to Arijit and try to bring you up to speed with the news that came in last week of a 30% price cut coming with regard to the upcoming spectrum auction. Why did the government decide to go in for it, and what does it mean for the telecom space? Arijit, explain it to our viewers.
Well, Shweta, if you look at it, of course, there were no takers for these 4 circles, which was Delhi, Mumbai, Karnataka and Rajasthan. So the empowered group of ministers and then the cabinet decided to bring down the reserve price by 30% so that bidders get interested in this. But what is interesting in this round of auctions or the upcoming auctions is the fact that along with, of course, the 1800 megahertz band of spectrum, or that is the auction where there were no the circles for which there were no takers, Delhi, Mumbai and Kolkata will also see the refarming process getting kick-started, which will mean that the 900 megahertz band spectrum, which if you look at in terms of the number of towers you need to actually cover the amount of sound quality or the voice quality, the more efficient 900 megahertz spectrum is also going to be put up for auction. This is happening because the telecom regulator in its recommendation had said that 18 to 24 months before the licenses come up for renewal, which in this case will be about November 2014, they should also be auctioned so that those operators or telecom companies which want to shift from 900 to 1800 should have the option of doing so, because 900 is going to be priced at twice that of the 1800 megahertz spectrum. So this will be the first time that 900 and 1800 will be simultaneously put up for auction. And just to ensure that there are enough participants in the auction, what the government is saying is that all those operators who want the licenses spectrum on renewal of the licenses will have to in fact participate in the auction and win the spectrum to have the right to retain the spectrum. So it is expected to be a more intense participation this time from the existing players and as well as new people who are probably looking to corner the 900 megahertz spectrum.
All right, so let's try and take that to the industry experts and find out if it's going to be more intense or not in the second round. Mr. Matthews, are you smiling? Finally, after all that lobbying, all the complaints and cribs about the reserve price being so high, finally the government seems to have paid attention.
I don't know whether it was cribbing and crying. I think it was reason, because very clearly if they had followed through with what we had represented, I don't think they would have had the problems they are. But I think we continue to focus and fixate on this reserve price when all along we've been saying, listen, set the reserve price at a reasonable level and allow the market dynamics of the auction to set the upper limit. To make the reserve price continuously almost coterminous with what you expect the final value, I think dampens the enthusiasm, limits the number of operators that might be interested, and really again puts us in the same problem we were initially on the first round of 1800. So we really don't think that this is the right way forward.
All right, right, Mr. Nripendra Mishra, if I could come to you to try and understand that the entire cycle that we've been through of a failed auction and then the realization within the government, many believe that one had to go through that just because the pressure on the government was way too much. This was coming in the backdrop of several accusations against the government of having given spectrum too cheap. So the government at least wanted to place the reserve price much higher. It was a recommendation that was given by the TRAI, and now having realized that perhaps it was too high, the government decided to go in for a 30% cut.
You see, let me first explain or clarify my understanding of what the decision is all about. My understanding is that the government have decided to cut by 30% the reserve price of 1800 megahertz band. Now, I just heard the introduction which said that also the 900 megahertz band is going to be combined with 1800 megahertz band for the second round of action. Now, that's not my understanding of the situation. I think there are three things we need to examine and we need to evaluate for coming to any conclusion. The first is that the 4 circles where there were no bids, they are going to be auctioned, and that's for 1800 megahertz band. The second part of auction could be to release in 1800 megahertz band some more spectrum, because that appears to be the direction of the Honorable Supreme Court, because they wanted to know why the full auction did not take place. So there could be some release of additional 1800 megahertz band, which will mean that it will be in other circles. And then the third issue is of 900 megahertz band. Now, to my understanding, the reforming of 900 megahertz band is not yet settled with the incumbents. It may be part of the telecom policy, it may be part of the TRAI recommendation, but it does need a certain degree of consultation with the, with the incumbents, the telecom service providers. And I do recall having read that the Deputy Chairman of Planning Commission had also observed that the reforming needs to be revisited. So I would say that yes, there has been a 30% now reduction, and that will perhaps ensure that the bids are received in the remaining 4 circles for 1800 megahertz band. You know, the problem comes up because we created and joined multiplicity of objectives with the auction process. For example, the reforming was one objective, the renewal of license was another objective, one-time payment beyond 6.4 megahertz by those who are holding more spectrum was the third objective. Now, once these objectives are combined with the auction, then we are actually to some extent coloring the environment of the auction. And I am of the view that there is a need to clearly separate the auction of 1800 megahertz band from these 3 objectives, which should be settled, which should be looked into, but that requires much more closer consultation with the telecom service providers, and only then we will reach to any meaningful conclusion, which perhaps would ensure that there is no legal challenge to the decision of the government. So these are the issues, and I would say that let us not go with the only objective of raising revenue from the telecom sector. Often it is said as a cash cow, and because ultimately consumer will be affected. Ultimately everything will be passed on in the form of tariff to the consumer. So I think the time has come when we must look into the auction of 1800 megahertz band and also draw lessons from the 3G auction, where no doubt the auction, there was a certain degree of euphoria, but that was because the data business was not tested. It was not known what will be the extent of growth. But in the case of 2G auction, these are very well tested grounds where one would know that what will be the kind of subscribers growth, what would be the growth in the average revenue per user, what would be the growth in terms of minutes of usage. So the 2G spectrum need not be seen in the background of 3G auction. 2G spectrum need not be mixed with the multiplicity of other objectives, and it must stand alone in order to ensure the success of the second round of auction.
All right, sir, very, very strong and clear viewpoints coming from you, and in fact it's a view that the industry has maintained for long, that perhaps the attempt is to mix way too many issues. What was really essential was that we required a plain vanilla auction, but what came as a recommendation was a series of other problems that the industry was facing, and I'm sure everybody will seem to echo his view. But Mr. Sood, before I go back to Mr. Mishra, I'd like to get a sense from you, that is 30% good enough before we get down to the larger scope of telecom and whether we need to separate this auction from the other issues?
Well, we in fact had recommended that the reserve price should be in the region of about 4,500 crores or so, which was in the last auctions set at about 14,000 crores.
Right.
So if we go by those recommendations that OSPI had made, we are still way too high.
Right.
And just as a dipstick, after this 30% reduction has been announced, if you would notice, there's only one company which has indicated that maybe it will think of bidding in Bombay, and that is Uninor, because they've lost their license in Bombay.
Right.
Nobody else, at least, has gone public and shown any interest that they're going to bid.
So you're saying 30% cut not good enough to say that the upcoming auction will be a success?
I don't think so. I don't think the upcoming auction will be.
Shweta, I think it opens more of a can of worms than it does answer. For first of all, the 30% reduction throws into question the valuation of the rest of the circles that were bid at the reserve price, because obviously those 4 circles that were unbid for, the reserve price was correlated in some methodology. So this 30% reduction, one, was never explained in terms of what the rationale was. Why not 40? Why not 50?
Exactly.
So therefore, those who bid are asking, hey, how about me too? So I don't think this is going to solve the problem.
So you're saying it's complicated issues further for the telecom sector. Mr. Jaideep Ghosh, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think in the last auction which happened last month, I think the industry has shown, far more sanity, if I may say so, vis-a-vis the 2010 3G auctions, wherein, irrespective of business case, I think bids went pretty high, and later on.
But do you also blame the business environment, the fact that what's happening right now in 2012, the overall economic environment is very different from what it was at the time of 3G?
Not that much different, in the context of 3G base price, all India was, I think, 3,500 crores kind of, and it went almost 5 times kind of thing. I don't think the economy has either improved or worsened that much to bring in that. I would say, I think this time the industry has behaved in a far more rational way, and hence the it's only, I think, of the total value of the auction spectrum which was put up last month, only 27% got actually realized. 9,400 odd crores. So forget getting anything in except Bihar, nowhere even it was sold for anything higher than reserve price. So in that context, I would again think, as Rajan was mentioning, why 30, why not 20, why not 50, and so on and so forth. That's not very clear to me. And secondly, also in that context, I would think there would be again, very, very limited response, in the next auction, which is supposed to happen, 3 months from now, if the prices are kind of, just about 30% low. And if the 900 megahertz also goes at 2 times, I would again be, I would be cautious in terms of seeing, what kind of bids do come in. While recognizing.
But okay, you're saying 30% not good enough. What if I say if it were 50%, you'd attract more bids? I mean, then we can say for sure that it would have been a success. Is that a fair point that we're making here?
We are suggesting, Shweta, that unless you really bring the reserve price to about 20% of the original reserve price, or even the modified reserve price, so you're
talking of an 80% cut.
Yeah, because when you look at it, when you look at 3G, in hindsight again, the reserve price was only 20% of the total final value. So again, you had a good benchmark that you could apply. And again, we keep on going back to this reserve price equals ultimate value. Why do we continue to follow into this trap?
Right, Mritunjay, the fact that, as Jaideep was saying, that we saw telecom companies becoming more disciplined or more rational, is this also perhaps a way of them sending a message to the government that don't try to milk us dry, and just because you've set that reserve price so high, it doesn't mean that we're going to bid? Or you actually think that the financials just don't allow them to? It just doesn't make business sense to bid at such high rates?
I think it's not just about messaging, and I think I really tend to agree with what you said towards the end. The financials actually don't allow them to bid at these prices. These prices are way too high for most of the new operators, or even for the incumbents, to actually go into the market. And I think that even the 30% cut which is being proposed now is it's still fairly high for any of the operators to start making money. And the only way to actually eventually make money with these kind of prices, or even with a 30% cut, is to significantly increase the rates and pass on the increase in costs to the end consumers. Also, the point on combining the auction, the bigger issue now stands is on the refarming of the 900 megahertz, and I think that is one of the and that's where the government is really looking for price discovery, because they know that if that refarming happens, a lot of the operators may not have a choice but to go by what the reserve price has been set, and that's what's going to really cause some issues, or a lot of issues actually, in the industry if the prices are this high, and obviously 900 megahertz is double of the license fee which is being currently proposed for the 1800. So it's going to lead to a fairly big financial obligation, because most of the operators are going to try, or the incumbents are going to try and retain their licenses. Even if they go in for the 1800 megahertz, the capex involved is significant. I mean, there are estimates of 1,71,000 new towers being constructed, and over one, yeah.
So we've got a sense from all our panelists in saying that perhaps 30% cut is not good enough, may not attract the kind of bids that the government is expecting. The second round of auctions also may not be as much of a success as the government is hoping it will be, because they believe that 30% is not good enough. Let me now move forward and take this discussion onto another platform, something that actually Mr. Mishra has raised here. The fact that is the government yet again falling into the trap of trying to do too many things at one time. The fact that if it decides to go in for an auction and separate the issues of refarming, of renewal of licenses, of one-time payment, is that a better way of approaching, and is that something that is highly recommended by the telecom sector as well? Mohammed Chaudhry, your view on the point that has been made by Mr. Nripendra Mishra.
Sure, Shweta, thanks for having me on the show. I know that you've discussed the 30% discount quite a lot, but may I just add one thought on that first, which is that typically when an operator is considering bidding for spectrum, it will be looking at a fair price to pay for value that it attributes to the asset that it is buying. And the fundamental problem with the way in which pricing was set for the metro circles at the last auction is that the value was set based on the revenues that are coming from those circles today. And if you look at a circle like Delhi, there is 220% mobile penetration. The number of users is very high, and therefore the number of minutes is very high in that circle. And consequently, the amount of value attributed to spectrum in that circle was also high. The problem with that, in terms of setting that as a benchmark for pricing the spectrum going forwards, is that it doesn't take account of the future value that people can get from buying more spectrum. So if you again look at a circle like Delhi, what is the amount of growth that you can expect in voice usage in that city over the next few years? The result is that the amount of voice growth you will see will be very limited. You will see much more voice growth in less penetrated circles in other parts of the country. So the value opportunity from growth of voice is quite limited in Delhi. So if you then look at what price people should pay for additional spectrum in that city, it really limits your field. The only people who are likely to bid are people who are already established in Delhi, because it's very unlikely that a brand new entrant would want to try and establish a business in such a competitive city. And if you look at the people who are already operating there, they are looking at not much value from revenue growth in voice, and possibly some benefits from easing congestion by having some more spectrum. So fundamentally, those are the reasons why even arguing whether a 30% reduction in a very high spectrum reserve price is reasonable. In our opinion, having thought about it in that way, it's the wrong place to start, if you like, in terms of what the percentage reduction should be. Many of the other panelists have said it, but in our opinion, the spectrum in circles such as Mumbai and Delhi should be priced at much lower at this point in time, for those who wish to acquire it, and it needs to be priced much lower, in order to engender a good degree of participation in the bidding for those circles.
Okay.
So coming back to your point about 1800 megahertz
yes,
and,
yes, Bob,
and
if you
900
could quickly
megahertz
touch upon that
running
as well.
together, yeah. Sure. I think the fundamental thing there, Shweta, is that the participants in the auctions going forwards fundamentally are relying on a clarity of information as to what's coming over the next few months and years. And at this point in time, there is still not enough regulatory clarity as to the timetable for allocation of spectrum over the next few years, and indeed for some of the other important policy issues which are being considered, around M&A rules, unified licensing, spectrum sharing, and so on and so forth. So really in that perspective, what operators would be looking for is that clarity. Now, once that clarity is there, whether the auctions are combined or whether they're sequential would then matter less, because everybody would be at least in an equal position of knowing what to expect and therefore how to play. So without that clarity being there, it's very, very difficult to say, whether it's going to be better or worse for the auctions for different spectrum bands to be combined, and whether that's going to lead to a better result.
All right, Mr. Nripendra Mishra, would you agree that there is complete lack of regulatory clarity for the telecom sector right now, and that's something that's getting more and more complicated as days and weeks are passing by? Because we started with the classic case of the Supreme Court ordering a fresh auction, cancelling 122 licenses. What came thereafter were a series of recommendations by the TRAI, and every time we've tried to seek a better clarity, we've landed ourselves in a situation where it's getting more and more complicated. Would you agree with that?
Well, let me say that there has been a lot of progress in the direction of regulatory clarity. The first step taken by the government was that the National Telecom Policy 2012 was announced. Of course, most of it is still at a list of wishes. How they would be implemented, that is yet to come. But there is a kind of feel that the licensing would no longer be coupled with spectrum. Spectrum would be auctioned separately, licenses will be given separately. There is also an indication that the merger and acquisition policy will be incentivized, which would mean that there will be consolidation in the telecom sector. So gradually the government has found some solutions to few questions. The government is looking at answering some of the major issues and trying to resolve it. It is in that context only that I still repeat my assertion that in the next round of auction, government has to realize that the resources would be put in the most efficient manner by the bidders where they would find that it is going to be lucrative or it is going to be sustainable, financially feasible. In that context, I would say that if the government was to clarify that the auction of 1800 megahertz band would be done as the first step and all other issues would be separately decided and they need not be linked with the price bid which is received in the auction of 1800 megahertz band, perhaps I would expect that more and more bidders would be there for the remaining 4 circles as well as for additional 1800 megahertz band slots. That is what I still wish to repeat. If that takes place, then I have every reason to believe and expect and hope that the second round of auction would be successful. A word about, the general impression is that the first auction was a complete flop. But the thing is that in most of the circles except the 4 circles, the reserve price was the bid. So whatever was the minimum price, though of course one can question why that reserve price was fixed, we are almost determining the market price. But the fact is that the bid was received to that extent. So if the government has brought down by 30%, I think it should be taken as a welcome step, because government is in a little bit of a jam, having seen that there were bidders for the reserve price in the remaining circles. Now to bring down drastically the reserve price in the remaining circles perhaps would be challenged in some manner or the other. As it is, I apprehend that those who are the winners of the last bid may question that how is it that we were asked to pay the reserve price and this second round is going to be less than 30%. So I personally think that, less complicated, straightforward, simple solution to the second round of auction would be in the interest and would ensure success.
Right, again, very strong viewpoints there coming from you, sir. Let me get a view from the sector experts and from the industry on that. Mr. Matthews, to you first.
First of all, Shweta, just to put the context of some of this pricing, we did this price per megahertz per population. Let me just give you a number here. The price per megahertz per population in Delhi for 1800 at the 30% reduction would come to about $3.70, right? Okay. In Germany, it's less than 1 cent, all right? In Italy, 3 cents. Portugal, 5 cents. If you aggregate everything across all circles, the price per megahertz per population in India would be 36 cents. So you have a price point value per megahertz at 36 versus the next highest, Portugal, at 5 cents. And what's my ARPU? In the opposite direction.
Okay, so you're yet again making a case for a much lower reserve price. But if you could also respond specifically to what Mr. Nripendra Mishra is saying here. Separate the auction, make it a plain vanilla auction, and not have a lot of other issues. That would ensure that the auction would be a success. Also the other point that you had also raised, we'll come to that, about what about the bidders in just the last auction, them questioning the price cut as well. So first on plain vanilla auction versus other issues.
So we agree with Mr. Mishra that clearly that yes, plain vanilla is better, but I think the point that we are making, that it is high time that the government empty its pockets of all this excess spectrum that it has. It's sitting on over 600 megahertz of spectrum. Put it all up. This is a long-term business, and we need that long runway to make those investments. So take the 2.3 if you've got anything left, take the 3G what you got, take 1800, take 900, 700, put it all up, come to a common reserve price, which is the simplicity factor, and let all those who want to bid come forward and bid.
Mr. Mishra, would you agree with that again? Is there a case of the government hoarding spectrum and not giving it away? And if it's trying to make a long-term policy for 20 years, is there a case to give up more spectrum?
You see, I have studied the auction in US system, also in UK. Perhaps in Indian context, it doesn't make sense to club 1800 megahertz band, 900 megahertz band, which is dependent on refarming and vacation, 700 megahertz band, on which there are many departments who are still putting a claim on that. So it is not practical to combine all of them and put up front for auction in terms of availability. I think the first step should be to, in a very transparent manner, government should announce what is the total availability of 1800 megahertz band and give a road path that will be auctioned first. Then the government should announce what are the availabilities in 900, then 700, 2.4, that is 2400. So those are the availabilities, and the government could only indicate the direction. But you cannot have a combined auction of all these spectrum bands in one go. Moreover, it will also have to be seen in the context of CDMA users and how, in what direction they are going to utilize it. Also broadband wireless access users. So overall, I think the government is doing okay of starting the auction of 1800 megahertz band. My difference opinion is that the government should not have put and kept some 1800 megahertz band for reserve in lieu of likely reforming of 900 megahertz band. It should make available, as has been observed by the Honorable Supreme Court, all the bands, megahertz spectrum volume which is available in 1800 for the auction purposes. Perhaps then that artificial scarcity would not have been created and we would have got better response. I think there is an opportunity in the second round, and it should be possible to come out openly about the availability of a spectrum in the public domain. That should be placed in public domain.
Okay, quick response from Mr. Sood and from Jerry, both who want to respond to this particular point that he's made.
Well, actually, I would differ from Mr. Mishra on this business of clubbing the two kinds of auctions together. We must remember what we are talking about. In fact, we are talking about three different kinds of auctions. One would be 1800 band auction for the period between now and when the first lot of licenses expire.
Okay.
Then for the period beyond the expiry date of the first round of licenses, which would consist of Delhi, Mumbai and Kolkata,
right,
we have to think of auctions for 1800 and also for 900.
Right.
In fact, by clubbing 1800 and 900 together, it facilitates the bidders to decide in real time as they are bidding in the auctions whether they want to go whole hog for 900, whole hog for 1800 or something in between, because dynamically they'll be able to assess which way the 1800 price is going and which way the 900 price is going.
Okay,
so
that's
in fact
an
that
interesting
helps the
viewpoint
bidders
as well, that it helps the bidders. Jaideep.
So I'll respond quickly.
Okay.
I know with full respect, I differ on all 3 points made by Mr. Mishra, but I'll keep it quick.
Yeah.
In terms of combining different spectrum brands, so I think I'll just give you 2. I have 6 here. I think February 2012, Switzerland, 1800, 2.1 gigahertz, 900, 800 megahertz, all were combined.
So you're saying that it's standard global practice
and
to
look
do
at
that,
the price.
it's happening all over the world.
500
right.
megahertz was sold only for 1.1 billion dollars, which further strengthens the point made by Rajan in terms of per capita per population.
Okay.
On the other point which he made, in terms of market determined price and all that, I think the last auction, I don't think it's market price, it is the stipulated price by government.
Okay, so, and we all know that the pressures that the government was under to price it so high. Yeah. My colleague Arijit Banerjee also has a few questions and a comment to make. Arijit, very quickly.
Shweta, just wanted to butt in and say very clearly that just to make a bit of facts and ground rules clear, there is at the moment no debate in terms of whether the 900 megahertz spectrum will be auctioned with 1800 or not. The cabinet and the empowered group of ministers has decided on that there will be a simultaneous auction. So there seems to be some amount of confusion that there is still a process on where this can be decided upon. For Delhi, Mumbai and Kolkata, what the government has decided in the cabinet is that there will be a simultaneous auction for 900 and 1800, and there is a very simple logic which Mr. Sood just enunciated, which is that when your 900 megahertz spectrum is coming up for refarming, it is coming up for renewal in 2014, and the government, the operators need to in real time tell the government when the auctions happen in March whether they want to keep the 900 with them or they want to shift to 1800. So therefore the simultaneous auction for 900 and 1800 will happen so that an operator can decide at the same time whether he wants to take 900 or go for 1800. And that's the reason why it is happening. And the cabinet has decided on this, at least in the 3 circles, Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, where licenses are coming up for renewal, that there will be a simultaneous auction for 900 and 1800. And remember, what the government has also decided is that the existing operators, which means companies like Bharti, Vodafone, will have to participate and indicate the price they want for that spectrum. So there is no escaping for them from not participating in the auction. They have to participate in the auction. So there are going to be bidders. The only thing that they have to decide is whether they want to retain the 10 megahertz of 900 they have with them, or they want to shift to 1800 and probably take 1800 megahertz spectrum. So operators who license come up for renewal have to compulsorily participate.
The compulsory bidding clause. Okay, so that's the entire controversy with regard to the government ensuring that they have that there is compulsory bidding. Arijit, very quickly also explain that point in greater detail to our viewers before I go to the panelists for a reaction.
What the government is basically saying is that both 900 and 1800 will be available to the operators to decide which spectrum they want. Now there are separate price points. So the operator has to decide whether at that particular price point the operators want a 900 megahertz, they want 1800, they want a combination of 900 or 1800. But what the government is saying is that if you do not participate in the auction, that means you are not interested in spectrum at that price point. So when the renewal comes up, then the whoever person has actually won the spectrum in the auction, which will happen in March, will get that spectrum in 2014. So operators who do not participate will have to say bye-bye to the spectrum they have not bid for. So the government is saying you bid for the spectrum, you indicate the price you want the spectrum in, and if you want to retain the spectrum, then you participate in the auction and pay the price. That's the logic which the government is giving to the operators, which in a way is making it compulsory for all those people who want to retain the 900 megahertz spectrum to actually participate in the auction and win the spectrum they want to retain.
All right, so mandatory bidding. If you want spectrum, you must bid. Is that a smart strategy on part of the government, or is it something that's going to adversely impact the operators? I know Mr. Mishra and several other panelists want to react to that, but I have to take a very quick break at this point. We'll get reactions to that after a quick break. Don't go away.
This base price would expect approximately somewhere around 20,000 crores for all the spectrum between 1800 and 900 megahertz.
The telecom industry today faces multiple challenges to drive revenue growth while sustaining profitability, yet its future prospects continue to be bright.
The period of difficulties is now coming to an end. During the last 1 year, our government has taken a number of forward-looking initiatives in the telecom sector.
Welcome back. Here with We Mean Business. Mandatory bidding, a good idea or a bad one? Let's quickly get our panelists to respond to that one. Mritunjay, to you first.
Yeah, I think, considering the circumstances and, let's face it, there has to be an auction and that's what the government's moving towards. It is definitely a good idea, but because it gives the flexibility to the operators to decide as to which, whether they want to partly or fully vacate the 9 megahertz band and have the option of actually immediately moving on to the 1800 megahertz band. So I think it definitely does make sense. The only issue is that how do you price it, and that's where probably a differentiation in terms of a new operator coming into a city with over 220% tele-density. The business model will be different and the valuation of spectrum possibly could be different than what an incumbent would view it from in terms of valuation. So that's the part when it gets mixed up is where I think there is some level of concern in terms of the market discovery process and the pricing. But having an option to actually go for an 1800 band, in my view, is a good idea.
Okay, Mr. Sood, what's your view on the entire mandatory bidding issue? You were telling me in the break that it's all right as long as the pricing is right.
Yes. The initial reaction of the operators would be that they would not like to be mandated to bid. But if you look at it from the government's point of view, what they are trying to do is ensure that reasonable bids come up in the 1800 band, and only then do they allow you to bid in the 900 band. From the government's point of view, it's not such a bad idea, but I think for it to be fair to the operators, it would work only if the reserve price is reasonably low. At these reserve prices, I think it's a bit unfair.
Shweta, as I said, this is highway robbery by another name. You know, you set a high reserve price and then you force somebody to bid for that. This is contrary to anybody's understanding of what a open, transparent, fair, market discovered price is. So clearly we don't think that this is the way to go. I think if, as Dr. Ahluwalia said, why don't you have a descending auction as opposed to only an ascending auction? If you think that the price is not right, then allow it to also go down.
Okay, Mr. Dipendra Mishra, I know you also wanted to react to some of those comments that were coming in before the break. Sir, you've heard what the panelists have to say, your views.
I am of the view that both legally and operationally, structurally, it is not possible to have a mandatory bidding of combining the 1800 megahertz band with 900 megahertz band. Firstly, the 900 megahertz band is presently occupied by the incumbents. It is under use. Therefore, the timing of the reforming, the capex requirement for refiring, the capital requirement for reforming, all are these issues which will have to be considered by the incumbents. Now, when you are putting for auction 1800 and 900 megahertz together, then think of a new player who is not incumbent. He is not sure whether he is going to get 900 megahertz band or not. When is the reforming going to be completed and the vacation is going to be declared? So it is just not possible. And how do you rule out the possibility of the whole reforming order being challenged in the court by the incumbents? So I think if we don't wish to complicate matters, then the way to go is to first bid for 1800 megahertz band, then talk about the reforming, the feasibility of it, the financial cost of it, and then go on the price and, if possible, auction it. For example, I'll tell you, it is very possible that those who are holding 900 megahertz band may seek a monetized solution rather than reforming. They may be willing to pay a certain negotiated price for retaining 900 megahertz band. In that case, the availability of 900 megahertz band will not be there. So, if we complicate matters, it is not going to work, and it will perhaps also, you will see that most of the telecom service providers will be spending more time in courts rather than with their company.
All right. Are the fears of litigation justified?
Yeah, clearly, I think it's something that we've said will happen. But I think, Shweta, we also have to look at the largest incumbent holder of 900 megahertz spectrum, which is MTNL.
Right.
So what is going to happen is that the understanding that MTNL is going to empty its pockets and the government is going to pay, all right, and tax you and me to make that payment, and that the whole concept of a level playing field goes away. Because if the government then turns around and gives it back to MTNL, their pricing structure obviously can be set at a much lower level than I, who have paid the full price and have had to raise it from either equity or debt or some other source.
Jaideep, would you agree that it's against the principles of making it fair, just, transparent? And as he's saying, there's the whole question of MTNL makes it even worse because you're talking about the pricing issue becoming a big worry.
Yeah, I think I don't see anything wrong in bidding for spectrum in terms of auction. I think it's only
because
the
price government's
is
logic
high.
is if you want it, bid for it, because you don't expect that it will. The minute it comes up for renewal in 2014, you're going to get it. So it's from the government's point of view, there's logical sense in going in for this strategy.
I tend to agree with this in terms of the principle, because this is a resource of national resource, and if you want to bid get it and use it for your business, do bid for it. It's only the question which Mr. Sood said, at what price is the question.
So you're more with the viewpoint that it's all right as long as the price is fair.
Yeah, I would think so, yeah.
So again, we are not opposing the auction process. Again, what we're saying is that there's a better way to address this, because we're saying, look, you can have the winner be calibrated against somebody who wants to roll it out in terms of broadband. Whoever rolls out broadband first, whoever goes to the rural market, those are also winning categories.
All right, now let's broad-base the discussion slightly and move across and discuss two other views that are very critical, both from the point of view of the consumer as well as from the point of view of the sector. One, which way are tariffs headed? We've heard this time and again coming from operators. The days of low tariffs are over. Be prepared to pay much higher for your mobile bills. But how much higher remains the question. Mohammed, given the turn of events over the past few weeks, what's the sense you're getting in terms of tariffs? What message do you have for consumers?
Well, firstly, of course, tariff increases is something which no market wishes to see. And when we look around the world, there have been hardly any examples of a long-term increase in tariffs in any market. What we've found in India is that there's a bit of a unique situation here, which is that most of the service providers are currently financially quite constrained. So their profits after tax are low or negative. And in that situation, when they've been faced with very high spectrum acquisition costs, which anyway form a large part of their overall expenditure, they've seen absolutely no way of making ends meet other than looking to service that through higher tariffs. So it's been a question of having to think of options like that, in order to make ends meet. The other problem, of course, Shweta, is that the industry is massively indebted. The current lending in the industry is not far shy of 200,000 crore, including all local and foreign debt. And when we looked a few months ago at what the impact on that debt might be if you take refarming into account, as well as spectrum acquisitions, we could see that could go up from 200,000 crore to 500,000 crore. Which of course would be unfundable if you look at the current economic situation, and if you also look at the exposure that the industry has to the banking industry already. So for all of those reasons, tariff increases are something which have been talked about for the last few months. Now, if you look at the auctions that took place a month ago, we didn't come out of those auctions thinking that tariff increases would be necessary, because the amount of excitement that the auctions caused was relatively limited, and the amount of money that operators spent was relatively small. So it really just depends on what happens next. But the sorts of tariff increases we've talked about, have been as high as 80 to 90% of basic tariffs, in terms of the increase. My own opinion for now would be that I don't think we're about to see increases of that nature, and I don't think any operator wants to increase tariffs. But if the burden remains high, and if the reserve prices that have been talked about even in today's discussions, remain at that level, then of course it has to remain a possibility, which will be bad for Indian consumers, particularly for low-end consumers who are most price sensitive, and ones who are in rural areas where they may even decide to actually get rid of their mobile connection, which would be a terrible thing from the point of view of social impact and economic development.
Right, an entire strata of consumers who are very price sensitive.
Yeah, but Shweta, I think you don't have to look any further than the airline industry, right? Two things can happen. You don't get to raise prices because of competitive pressure, and the industry goes to hell in a handbasket, and you have folks folding up shop.
So you're seeing telecom heading the aviation way?
Well, kind of. At least the principles hold, because it's the fundamental issues of economics. So what happens is that then you go to mergers, and when you go to mergers, you have dominant carriers, and then dominant carriers raise prices. So again, one way or the other, you're going to get into that syndrome.
Okay, also let me quickly read out what the Prime Minister had said about the telecom industry just last week, saying the sector has had to face some tough challenges in the past months. That's a given. However, I believe that the period of difficulties is now coming to an end. I'm confident that the futuristic policy regime that we're putting in place will address the concerns that have been worrying investors and will provide a new impetus to the growth of telecommunications in the country. That's what the Prime Minister had said about the telecom sector. Is the worst over for Indian telecom? Mr. Sood.
I don't quite think so, because whereas the government is genuinely trying to resolve issues through its new policy declarations, at the same time it is trying to bring in new dispensations which amount to modification of license conditions midstream. They are talking of a one-time spectrum fee, for example, on current holdings of spectrum, and so on and so forth. So if these new kind of hits come on to the bottom line of the operators, we can still see there would be some period where all these things will need to be sorted out. So according to me, I see uncertainty for another 1.5 to 2 years at least.
Mritunjay, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think, what's happened is that there has been clarity and the taint of the scam, etc. The government's been able to go past that. So from one perspective, that's over. And it's really a fresh start where, a lot of clarity, or the government is proposing a lot of clarity as they go forward. But till the auctions take place, until refarming is settled, till the new spectrums are allocated, there is going to be uncertainty for the next maybe year, 2 years. Also, I think just to add,
clearly not coming to an end anytime soon, Mr. Nripendra Mishra.
Let me first touch a little on the likely prospect of tariff revision or upward revision. I would only say that while, a little adjustment upward is perhaps expected and maybe also accepted, a very drastic increase, or let's say increase of 90% or 80% in the tariff, may create problems in the long run, because tariff at the moment, fortunately, is not under control of either the regulator, in the sense that he has put it on forbearance, and the department of course has no say in the matter because it is with the regulator. So the most cautious approach to tariff revision would be to have some increase, but not make an increase which would lead to discussion either in the parliament, or which would create a situation where an average person in rural area or urban area starts surrendering its mobile facility. That's on the tariff. On the second part, I also agree that the worst is over. There is a lot more clarity. There is a certain direction which is now seen. The path is now clear. But I think we would be making the most serious mistake if we combine all the problems and try and get one solution and try and get one size fits all solution to the issues which have been raised. So it should be gradual, because there are legal issues. A new licensing policy is going to be announced. The spectrum is going to be separated. Reforming, one-time payment, these are all issues which are not going to go away very soon, and they all have financial implications. So the worst is over, but I don't think the sector is out of the financial problem yet.
All right, the sector clearly not out of the woods just yet. Some sort of policy clarity emerging, but clearly not good enough. The operators continue to remain worried and are hoping for more policy clarity. As far as tariffs are concerned, clearly nobody wants high tariffs. And as far as a parliament debate, we all know anything can turn into a parliament debate these days. So with that, it's a wrap here on We Mean Business tonight. Many thanks all of you for joining us and sharing your views. Remember, you, the viewer, can also send us your feedback on the show. You can write into us at WMB@NDTV.com. That's our email ID. You can also send in your feedback to us or by SMS at WMB space your message at 56388. You can also write to me on my Twitter handle at ShwetaRKNDTV. Thanks. Goodbye.